On the evening of the 14th of December 2025, Bondi Beach looked exactly as it always does at the start of summer. The sun was dropping toward the horizon. Children ran across the grass. Families gathered near the water as music and holiday lights marked the beginning of Hanukkah. Then, without warning, the sound of gunfire cut through the crowd. Within minutes, one of Australia's most iconic public spaces became the scene of the deadliest terrorist attack in the nation's history. 16 people were killed, dozens wounded. A holiday rooted in light and survival transformed into a moment of national trauma. This is the story of what exactly happened at Bondi Beach, how the attack unfolded, who was targeted, and how seconds of courage, chaos, and failure reshaped Australia's sense of safety forever. Before we continue, if you want more deep dive crime stories, terror investigations, and underworld cases from Australia and around the world, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Now let's go back to Bondi Beach and let's start with the calm moments just before the chaos. Bondi Beach is not just a tourist destination. It is one of Australia's most recognisable public spaces, drawing an estimated 2.5 million visitors every year. On any given summer evening, it becomes a crossroads of locals, tourists, families, and workers finishing their day. For Sydney's Jewish community, Bondi carries even deeper meaning. Sydney is home to roughly 50,000 Jewish residents, and Bondi sits at the heart of that community. Synagogues, kosher cafes, Jewish schools, and community centres are woven into the surrounding streets. For years, public celebrations have been part of daily life here, open, visible, and deliberately welcoming. One of those traditions is Hanukkah by the Sea, an annual event organised by Chabad of Bondi. The celebration marks the beginning of Hanukkah, a festival commemorating survival against persecution. It is family-focused, with music, children's activities, candle lighting, and speeches centred on resilience and identity. On the 14th of December 2025, organisers estimated nearly 1,000 attendees, including elderly residents, young families, tourists, and children. The event took place at Archer Park, a small green space just east of the Bondi Pavilion, bordered by a pedestrian footbridge and overlooking the beach. By design, it was open and accessible. No ticketing, no barricades, no heavy police presence. Just a public gathering in a country that has long prided itself on safety. Yet the weeks leading up to the event carried an undercurrent of unease. Since October 2023, Australian authorities had recorded a sharp rise in anti-Semitic incidents nationwide. In August 2024, the Australian Security Intelligence Organisation raised the national terrorism threat level from possible to probable, citing risks tied to political and religious tensions. Still, on that evening, none of that felt immediate. Children played near the playground. Candles were prepared. The crowd faced the ocean, unaware that danger was already moving into position behind them. At 6:47 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time, emergency calls began flooding into New South Wales Police. Witnesses reported gunfire at Archer Park, just metres from the shoreline. By the time the first dispatcher logged the incident, the attack was already underway. Video footage, later verified by multiple news organisations, shows two men dressed in black positioned on a pedestrian footbridge overlooking the park. From that elevated vantage point, they opened fire on the crowd below. Investigators confirmed that around 50 shots were fired in rapid succession, at least one from a bolt-action rifle, a weapon known for accuracy rather than speed. The first seconds were marked by confusion. Many initially thought the sounds were fireworks. That illusion collapsed almost instantly. People dropped to the ground. Parents grabbed children and ran. Others froze, unable to locate where the shots were coming from. The open layout of the park left little cover. The gunman did not fire randomly into the air. Police later confirmed the attack was deliberate and targeted, aimed directly at the gathering celebrating Hanukkah. Survivors described seeing people struck while trying to shield others, some falling only a few metres from the playground. Within minutes, the scene became unrecognisable. Shoes, prams, and food were left behind as hundreds fled toward the beach, nearby streets, or the water itself. Some hid behind trees and concrete walls. Others lay wounded in the open, bleeding as shots continued. At 6:57 p.m, Just 10 minutes after the first calls, NSW's police released a public statement confirming an active incident at Bondi Beach. Officers were already moving in, but the geography of the area, the bridge, the open park, the dense crowd complicated the response. A nearly continuous 11-minute video, filmed from approximately 50 meters away, later captured the full horror: gunfire echoing, bodies on the ground, and frantic attempts to treat the wounded using whatever was available. By the time the shooting slowed, the damage was irreversible. What had begun as a public holiday celebration had, in less than a quarter of an hour, turned into one of the bloodiest crime scenes Australia has ever seen. As gunfire continued and panic spread across Archer Park, most people did what instinct demanded. They ran, they hid, they shielded their children and prayed the shooting would stop. One man did something else. Ahmed Al-Ahmed, an unarmed bystander attending the event, found himself close enough to one of the gunmen to see an opening. According to police and verified video footage, one attacker had moved down from the bridge area and was reloading while facing away from the crowd. In that moment, Ahmed made a decision that was later be described by authorities as life-saving. He charged. Video reviewed by investigators shows Ahmed tackling the gunman from behind, forcing him to the ground. During the struggle, he managed to wrest the rifle from the attacker's hands, breaking the immediate threat. Witnesses described screams turning into stunned silence as people realized what had just happened. Ahmed did not flee. Instead, he turned the weapon back toward the attacker, holding him at bay long enough for the gunman to retreat toward the pedestrian bridge where the second shooter was positioned. Seconds later, police officers arriving on foot engaged the attackers. New South Wales Premier Chris Minns later confirmed that Ahmed was shot during the confrontation and hospitalised with gunshot wounds. Despite his injuries, Minns publicly stated that he had no doubt Ahmed's actions prevented far greater loss of life. Counterterrorism analysts echoed that assessment. With nearly 1,000 people in an open park and no immediate cover, even a brief interruption in gunfire would have reduced casualties. Police later confirmed that one of the attackers was actively firing at the crowd when he was disarmed. In the days following the attack, Ahmed's name spread across Australia and beyond. He did not seek recognition. Family members said he acted instinctively, driven by the sight of children and families in danger. In a crime defined by hatred and planning, his actions stood apart. A single, unarmed civilian altered the course of a terrorist attack, not through force of ideology, but through a split-second choice to step forward when everyone else was trying to survive. New South Wales police officers were already nearby when the first emergency calls came in at 6:47 p.m. But the situation they were moving into was chaotic and evolving by the second. The attackers held a tactical advantage: elevation, distance, and an exposed crowd with nowhere to hide. Within minutes, uniformed officers reached the pedestrian footbridge overlooking Archer Park. Verified footage shows an officer stepping onto the bridge as gunfire continued. From behind the attacker's position, police opened fire. One of the gunmen, later identified as the father, was shot and killed at the scene. The second attacker was critically wounded, restrained, and transported to the hospital under armed guard. By the time the shooting stopped, approximately 11 minutes had passed since the first shots were fired. 16 people were dead. At least 42 others were injured, including 2 police officers, several with life-threatening wounds. But the danger was not over. As officers secured the area, attention turned to a vehicle parked on Campbell Parade, the main road running parallel to Bondi Beach. Inside the car, police located suspected homemade explosive devices. Bomb squad units were immediately deployed, and the surrounding area was evacuated for a second time. The devices were later rendered safe, confirming that the shooting was not meant to end at the bridge. The presence of explosives fundamentally changed how authorities viewed the attack. This was not a spontaneous act of violence. Police formally declared the incident a terrorist attack, a designation that triggers federal counter-terrorism protocols. The Australian Security Intelligence Organisation confirmed that one of the attackers was previously known to them, though not assessed as an imminent threat. NSW Police Commissioner Mal Lanyon later stated that the attackers appeared prepared for mass casualties beyond the initial gunfire. The combination of elevated firing positions, high-powered firearms and explosives pointed to deliberate planning. By nightfall, Bondi Beach was sealed off as a crime scene. Forensic teams worked under floodlights while families searched for loved ones. What had unfolded was no longer just a mass shooting. It was a coordinated act of terror. one that narrowly failed to become even deadlier. Within hours of the shooting, investigators confirmed what many feared. The attack was not carried out by strangers passing through Bondi. The two gunmen were a father and his son, aged 50 and 24, acting together. And according to New South Wales Police, the father was killed at the scene during the confrontation on the pedestrian bridge. The son survived despite being shot by police and was taken to the hospital in critical condition under constant armed guard. Authorities later confirmed the younger attacker as Naveed Akram, a 24-year-old man living in Sydney's western suburbs. What emerged next raised troubling questions. Police confirmed that the father was a licensed firearms owner, legally permitted to possess 6 firearms, several of which were believed to have been used in the attack. The weapons were not smuggled. They were acquired within Australia's tightly regulated gun system, making this case one of the rare instances where licensed firearms were used in a mass casualty attack. More concerning still was the role of intelligence agencies. The Australian Security Intelligence Organisation acknowledged that the younger attacker was known to ASIO prior to the shooting. He had been assessed in the past for extremist links, including reported associations with ISIS-aligned ideology, but was deemed not an immediate threat. In the days following the attack, police raided multiple properties linked to the pair, including a home in Bonnyrigg and another in Campsie, where they were believed to have stayed. Investigators also revealed that the father and son had told relatives they were going on a fishing trip to Jervis Bay, a false story used to conceal their movements. Security analysts later noted the familiar pattern: ideological radicalization combined with family reinforcement, access to weapons, and a target chosen for symbolic value. The attackers did not select Bondi at random. They chose a Jewish religious celebration on a public holiday in an open space with minimal security. Authorities have been careful not to release unnecessary personal details, citing the risk of glorification. But the facts are clear. This was not an impulsive act. It was planned, rehearsed, and justified in the minds of those who carried it out. And despite multiple warning signs, it unfolded in plain sight. By the morning after the attack, the numbers had settled into something final and unbearable. 16 people were dead. 14 died at the scene, their injuries too severe for paramedics to overcome. 2 more died later in the hospital, despite emergency surgery and intensive care efforts. Their ages ranged from 10 to 87 years old. At least 42 people were injured, according to New South Wales Health. 5 were listed in critical condition, and many more suffered gunshot wounds, shrapnel injuries, and crush injuries sustained during the panic. Among the wounded were 2 police officers, both struck while moving toward the gunfire. The victims reflected the diversity of the crowd: children who had come for games and music, elderly residents who had attended the event for years, community leaders who had helped organize the celebration. Authorities confirmed that 1 Israeli national was killed and another injured, while a French citizen was also among the dead, turning the attack into an international tragedy. Several victims were later publicly identified. Chabad rabbis Eli Schlanger and Yaakov Levitan were killed, along with community member Reuven Morrison, all prominent figures within Sydney's Jewish community. Alex Kleitman, a Holocaust survivor, was shot and killed while attempting to shield his wife. The youngest victim, 10-year-old Matilda, was attending the event with her family. Hospitals across Sydney activated mass casualty protocols. Surgeons worked through the night. Blood banks issued urgent donation appeals. Families waited in emergency departments, checking lists, calling phones that would never ring again. What followed was a second wave of trauma. Survivors described replaying the sounds of gunfire. Parents spoke of guilt for surviving when others did not. Children were treated for physical injuries and psychological shock. Community leaders emphasized that the victims were not symbols. They were teachers, grandparents, volunteers, and students. People who believed that a public park in a country known for strict gun laws was a safe place to celebrate faith. The scale of loss placed the Bondi attack as the second deadliest mass shooting in Australian history, surpassed only by the 1996 Port Arthur massacre and the deadliest terrorist attack the country has ever recorded. By dawn on the 15th of December 2025, the attack at Bondi Beach was no longer just a local crime story. It had become a national emergency and an international headline. Flags were lowered. Vigils formed outside synagogues, beaches and city squares across Australia. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese addressed the nation, calling the shooting a deliberate, targeted terrorist attack on Jewish Australians and confirming that it occurred on the first night of Hanukkah.
This is a targeted attack on Jewish Australians on the first day of Hanukkah, which should be a day of joy.
He described the violence as anti-Semitic and unequivocal, rejecting any attempt to frame it as random or isolated. The New South Wales Premier, Chris Minns, echoed that message, stating plainly that the victims were targeted because of who they were and what they were celebrating. Within hours, Australia's federal counterterrorism framework was activated. Security was increased at Jewish schools, synagogues and community centres nationwide. Armed police patrols became visible in major cities, particularly in Sydney and Melbourne, home to the country's two largest Jewish populations. The response extended well beyond Australia's borders. Leaders from more than 20 countries issued formal condemnations, including the United States, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, India, and Canada. The United Nations Secretary General described the attack as an act of terror against civilians exercising their right to worship. Several governments ordered immediate security reviews of Jewish sites within their own borders. In New Zealand, armed officers were deployed to guard Jewish institutions the following day, citing the Bondi attack as the direct trigger. European cities hosting Hanukkah events increased police presence, some cancelling public celebrations altogether. Jewish organisations worldwide warned that the attack reflected a broader trend. Since October 2023, anti-Semitic incidents had surged globally, with Australia experiencing one of its sharpest increases on record. Community leaders stressed that Bondi was not an anomaly, but a warning. At the same time, voices across religious and cultural lines condemned the violence. Australia's National Imams Council issued a statement calling for unity and explicitly rejecting anti-Semitism and political violence. Bondi Beach itself remained closed for days. Flowers, candles, and handwritten notes covered the fences. One message appeared again and again, written in different languages but carrying the same meaning. This should never have happened. In the days after the Bondi attack, a question surfaced again and again. How did this happen in Australia? For decades, Australia has pointed to the 1996 Port Arthur massacre, where 35 people were killed.
35 people died when Bryant ran amok with his arsenal of weapons at the busy tourist destination of Port Arthur in Tasmania,
as the event that reshaped its gun laws and dramatically reduced mass shootings. Since then, firearm-related mass casualty attacks have been rare. That history made Bondi feel unthinkable. But counter-terrorism experts cautioned that the threat landscape had changed. According to the Australian Security Intelligence Organisation, ideologically motivated violent extremism has been one of the country's fastest-growing security concerns. In August 2024, ASIO raised the national terrorism threat level from possible to probable, citing rising community tensions, online radicalisation, and global conflicts spilling into domestic spaces. The Bondi attackers emerged from that exact environment. Anti-Semitic incidents in Australia had already surged sharply following the October 2023 Gaza war. Jewish community organisations reported record numbers of threats, vandalism, and harassment. In 2024 alone, several Jewish sites were targeted, including a synagogue in Melbourne that Australian authorities later linked to foreign-backed extremist activity. What made Bondi different was scale and symbolism. This was not an attack on a building at night or an anonymous threat online. It was a public execution attempt during a religious celebration, in daylight, in one of the most visible places in the country. Analysts also noted parallels with other lone actor and small cell attacks internationally, online extremist ecosystems, legal access to weapons, and target selection rooted in identity rather than opportunity. The father and son dynamic echoed cases seen in Europe and the Middle East. The discovery of homemade explosive devices further underscored the intent. Investigators confirmed that the shooting was likely only one phase of a broader plan. Had the explosives been deployed, casualty numbers could have surpassed even the worst projections. In the weeks that followed, Australian lawmakers faced renewed scrutiny over intelligence thresholds, firearm licensing reviews, and the balance between civil liberties and prevention. Survivors and families demanded accountability, not just mourning. Bondi forced a reckoning, not with gun laws alone, but with the assumption that distance and past success guaranteed future safety. The attack shattered that illusion, replacing it with a harder truth. Extremism adapts and complacency carries a cost. Do you think Australian authorities had enough warning signs to prevent the Bondi attack? Or were the gaps unavoidable? How should open public community events be protected going forward without changing what makes them open in the first place? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Like the video, subscribe for more in-depth crime and investigation stories, and thanks for watching.